and which happens all the time every day, and you don't even really think about it. Um, that story you talked about with the lemon, I remembered somebody in New York when I first came to New York, and I was going to college, and I moved into a really bad neighborhood thinking, you know, it was okay, I could handle it, and I was like cool and hip. And somebody was hiding under the stairs with a 4-inch knife, you know, and just waiting for somebody to come into the building. And as I went up the building, he came up right behind me, and I could feel his breath on the back of my neck, thinking, okay, now I'm going to be raped, I'm going to be killed, this is horrible, I don't know what to do. I was trying to keep really, really cool. And I was walking up the stairs, and he got closer and closer, and I get to, I was on the 5th floor walk up, and I get to the 4th floor thinking, I don't know anybody in this building. And I just moved in, so I'm knocking on the door, and the person behind me, he was a young kid, and he was really high. And he stood on the landing, and he sees that nobody's answering the door. He starts coming up. All of a sudden, the door opens, and there was a man who didn't speak English, he only spoke Spanish, stared at me, and I said, "Is Raul here?" Yeah. And he just stares at me. He doesn't say anything. And the boy that was behind me, because he had pulled out his knife, I forgot to say that. He showed it, you know, he pulled it out, and he was so happy. This man put his hand in his pocket. He was about maybe 5 feet tall. I mean, he was smaller than me. And he put his hand in his pocket and just looked at me and looked at the kid on the landing, looked at me again, looked at the kid on the landing, and the kid started walking down backwards the stairs. And he waited there, didn't say a word, and the kid went out, and then he let me walk up to my apartment right above him, and I never ever saw him again, and I never exchanged a word with him, and he saved my life, literally. So it reminded me of the lemon story. I mean, it's a little more dramatic. Thank you.
You should lead the session next time. Sorry.
I didn't actually, until talking in this group, realize what a gift I received from someone that they definitely didn't intend to give me a gift. And I didn't recognize it as a gift until now, talking to these people, and when in a past career working for a large consumer packaged goods company, I was sitting in a meeting with a group of people, and they were talking about a brand of really crappy high fructose corn syrup drink that is marketed as vitamin enriched punch. And they were talking as if it's normal to talk about the target market is poor black women who think this is really juice, that this is one of our targets. And at that point I realized, what am I doing here using what I consider, you know, things that are of value and, you know, a gift for me, and personally my gift of my abilities to do this. This is wrong. And it was a turning point of me jumping off the corporate one train and jumping onto another train where I was going to use my skills to try to enrich people's lives, as opposed to I was going to try to learn how to tell the truth to people, as opposed to what was pointed out to me now, where I was trying to deceive people. And the gift of that brand person, who I can't remember who it was, of saying that helped me, is on the path I am now, where I'm hoping I can help people eat well and be healthy, as opposed to that other path, which was trick people to make money.
I'm also going to break the rules a little bit and not tell the story that we talked about, even though it was lovely. But as I'm sitting here, I'm realizing it's very apropos, because I'm realizing that a gift that I gave actually would not have been possible had it not been for Etsy, which I'm actually really happy to hear is a really wonderful company. So without going into the sore details, and this could sound like it's about me, and it's hopefully it's not interpreted that way, but a woman I knew and reconnected with who had cancer and was blogging about it. I reconnected with her online, and she was a wonderful blogger and a wonderful lady. And in one of her blogs, she wrote something about she just wanted to jump into her little red hope wagon or something like that. And for whatever reason, it inspired me to want to get her a gift, like something small, for Christmas, for the holidays. And thank goodness that Etsy existed, because where else in the world could you type in the words little red wagon and like a bajillion things would come up. And one of them was a little charm on a necklace. Anyway, that woman has subsequently passed away, but she has a young daughter, and I kind of hope that somewhere in the universe this little red wagon continues to exist. And frankly, I think it's worth sharing the story with you to know that without Etsy, this woman would not have had the pleasure of that gift, and I obviously treasure the giving of that gift, and hopefully it goes on to have many lives after.
Hello, I'm Keith Dent from Rising Tide Capital in New Jersey, but I was inspired by my friend Meredith's story here, because something that she was given actually has transformed her life along the way, and she's been able to transform the lives of people that have come in contact with her. And she was given a plant that she put in her store. She has a arts, it's an arts hair store, that's good, hair salon, there you go. And she was given a small plant, and that plant has since grown, and she's been able to, you know, kind of purge the plant and give to others. So I think that's very symbolic just from the conference. We're here because we receive plants of knowledge, localism, sustainability for others, and we take it out and we try to share it with others. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Birju. Building on Keith's point and playing off of what happened in our triad, we had an interesting theme come up that there's a bit of a paradox. The most ordinary or small gift that we were all talking about was a shift in thinking. And if you think about a continuum of smallest and largest, there's this paradox that comes up because a shift in thinking can exist on either side of the continuum. But if you think about it as a circle, they fit together quite nicely. It just stuck out to me as a reflection.
Just to follow up on that shift in thinking, I just want to talk about leaders and the concept of leadership. I recently moved to Kalamazoo, and I met someone in one of the neighborhood associations, which I was hoping to use as the basis of a community movement, because there's 24 of them in existence. And I went to a meeting, and there's like 2,500 households in this neighborhood association, and about 10 households that participate. And so we got together with some of the people that didn't participate, and it was incredible how many people did not think of themselves as leaders. And you know, I've read Peck and others, and their whole concept of a community being, as a communitarian, being based on a group of all leaders. And so I think as soon as we have so long in this country and in the world separated leaders and managers from common ordinary people, or the extraordinary from the ordinary, that the transformation that I saw in some of these people, and hopefully will continue, is that all of the people in this neighborhood district are now excited and are starting to think of themselves as leaders and participants in the neighborhood association. So that transformation in thinking, which is in its infancy, hopefully will continue.
Fantastic. So I think one of the things before we move to Judy and then Birju, one of the things I want to share a story of a friend of mine, which I alluded to earlier. It's this guy. So the thing that we want to really focus on is how do we create a culture of giving in the context that we're in, particularly business. So this guy has done some groundbreaking research, and I want to share one particular thing. But first I want to tell you his story. This is the youngest tenured professor at Wharton, Professor Adam Grant. He was on the cover of New York Times Sunday magazine last month. And he has done some really interesting research. So when he was 14, his swim coach in college says, you know, great, you want to be a diver, but you're like Frankenstein, you can't do it, go pick another sport. And he kind of takes that and he says, you know what, I'm going to do it. And he decides to practice 6 hours a day for the next 4 years. Makes it to the Junior Olympics. Is on the team. I think he went to Harvard. I might have, I think he was at Harvard. He made it to the state finals. And there was this guy who was his competition. And he looks at him and he says, you know, you're doing this wrong. You should actually do it like this. And it turns out he got second place. And the guy he helped got first place. He had worked so hard to get that top nod, but he just couldn't help himself and help. So then you'd say, okay, well, senior year, same thing. He helps him again. And he loses again. He gets second place. So he just had this nagging thought in his mind that, look, those who help, those who give, actually end up at the bottom of the rung. So then he ends up becoming very successful in business, and he decides to study this thing. And so as I mentioned earlier, he says there's 3 kinds of people in any context, in any cultural setting, in any company. He says there's takers, those who just take, and you would presume that the takers are the ones, like his competition, they get up to the top, right? Like everyone at the top is a taker. Matchers, those who kind of match, and givers. So he looks at all his data and he says, well, givers got to be at the bottom, right? Because they're sort of like the suckers, right? And they're nice guys, but they're never going to get up to the top. So he looks at his data and he finds that actually givers are at the bottom. But then he notices something very curious, is that givers are also predominantly at the top. So he says the least successful engineers, med school students, are givers. But he finds that givers earn, and he says, look, givers earn 14% less money. They have 2 times the chance of, double the chance of being crime victims. They're judged as 22% less powerful. This is his research. But he also found that they dominate at the top of the pyramid. Over time, givers got 11% higher grades. Over time, because then cooperation starts to kick in. They get 11% higher grades, deliver 25% more sales, and 50% more annual revenues. There's research after research that where he's shown this same phenomena. And so if you're trying, okay, so I'll just go through a couple more things. So givers, takers, and matchers, they all succeed. But when givers succeed, it spreads and it cascades. And giving is good for your health, emotional state of being, and your mental stillness. And this, Shalom Schwartz, I'm sure most of you heard of him. He went to all the countries, and he says, well, what are your top values? Everybody cares about giving. Everyone. In 70 countries he studied, every single one of them said giver values were at the top. So we really care about giving. We think that giving is going to be at the bottom, but it actually ends up being good for us and good for our ecosystem. So in any ecosystem, you're going to have the takers, you're going to have the matchers, and you're going to have the givers. Now, how can you take, there are many nuances to this, but here's the one bit of research that I found to be fascinating. What is the one key thing to create more givers in an ecosystem? So they did this experiment. It was a card game. And here's the card game. So 4 of us are playing 6 rounds, right? And every round, we can either give $2 to the central kitty, or you can just keep all the money. Let's see, no, keep $3? Let me see. I don't remember. Okay, take 3. Okay, if you take for yourself, you get $3. You put You can either take and keep 3, or you can say, I'm going to give to the central kitty, and that's going to be $2. Now, if everyone decides to give $2, right, that's $8 over 6 rounds. That means everyone gets $48. Great. So if everyone is a giver, $48. Now, if everyone is a taker, you say, look, other people are all just going to take, so I'm just going to, do the safe bet. I'm just going to keep my $3. Over 6 rounds, you get $18. And if you are the sucker, where you give and everyone else is taking, you get $12. So really, you look at this scenario and you say, well, if everyone is a giver, of course, you want the $48 model. That's the world that we want to live in, right? Assume everyone's a giver and everyone acts in that way. But what if you are the sucker? Then you lose out. Right? And this is the real life scenario. But the most interesting thing about this is that when they played groups with consistent contributors, so where they actually planted these people in these circles and said, all you got to do is just consistently give. Right? So they were that one giver. They said, even if I'm the sucker, that's okay. But as soon as they were the giver, a lot of conditional contributors went from taking to giving. It started changing the whole ecology. So groups with consistent contributors, 26% more money was raised. So consistent contributors, there's a lot of research from this, I think, at Kellogg. Right? You look at consistent contributors, they look for the collective good first and personal good second. Not only do they benefit financially, but they also help the conditional contributors. And in a large group, this essentially means if someone acts as a friend, it's easier for others to act as friends, and everybody wins. So how can we create a culture of generosity in our ecosystems? Yeah, that's our question. That's the question that we want to ask Judy and Birju, and say, what are the personal practices that we do so we can create these consistent contributors? How do we honor inner transformation in the work that we're doing so that can foster this kind of behavior in, again, the ecosystems that we're in? So I don't know which one of you wants to go first. You're ready? Judy's ready.
I wanted to start off just by piggybacking on something that Otto said earlier about how change comes by raising the level of consciousness. And everybody here in business has heard of the concept of the invisible hand that was misused. Adam Smith wrote about it, but the right-wingers talk about how if we all are guided by our self-interest in business without the impediments of regulation, that we can create an economy that serves everybody and solves all of our problems. It's called market fundamentalism. And, of course, that's not true. That's not ended up serving all. But I like the concept of the invisible hand if it's about not collective profit-seeking, but about collective consciousness. That there can be an invisible hand if we raise consciousness to the tipping point. The consciousness that we are all interconnected. If we actually all believe that, then we would make decisions for the common good. And so it's not about don't do these things. It's not about rules and regulations, thou shalt not steal or thou shalt cooperate or whatever. It's about understanding and believing that we're all interconnected and having that consciousness so that you automatically make decisions in the best interest of all. So for me, when I made the decision to share my proprietary information about where I source my farm products from, it wasn't that I said to myself, well, thou shalt cooperate, thou shalt share. Those are the rules, I did it because I loved the pigs, and I did it because I loved nature, and I loved the rural communities that were being destroyed. So I did it from a place of love. It had nothing to do with what are the moral laws or whatever. It's just like how I was guided. Another example of this is, kind of Otto mentioned earlier also about the journey from the head to the heart. And another sort of example in my work life was hearing about the opportunity to buy renewable energy. And I knew about climate change. In fact, we had programs at the White Dog about climate change. but I hadn't been motivated to sign up for renewable energy, even though Pennsylvania was deregulated, and I could do that now, just like California. I could sign up for renewable energy. So I knew in my head it was the right thing to do, but I didn't do it until there was a drought in Pennsylvania. And I was up in my favorite little place to hike in the Pocono Mountains, and when I started to walk through the woods, I saw that the ferns on Fern Hill that usually were green and lush were all dried up like brown tissue paper on the forest floor. And as I walked through the forest, there was just a eerie silence. I could just hear the rustling of the leaves and the breaking of the sticks, and there was not even the birds were singing. I came to the stream, and there's just dust on the rocks, and I could just feel, you know, in my being, the stress of the woods. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is what it's going to be like with climate change, that parts of the world are going to have droughts and fires, and other parts of the world, storms and floods. And of course, that's what's happened. This was like 12 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. And so I connected my head and my heart. And I went back to Philadelphia and said, let's find out about renewable energy. And the White Dog Cafe became the first business in Pennsylvania to sign up for 100% of our electricity coming from renewable sources. And again, it wasn't, you know, that this is the right thing to do. It was because I love the woods, you know. I love nature. So it comes naturally to us, you know, when we follow our heart, when we are open to our own inner wisdom and our knowledge and our love to do those things. Another short example is I was at a business conference and I heard about the concept of a living wage, the voluntary commitment on the part of a business owner to pay not the minimum wage, but the living wage, how much it actually costs to live in a particular town. And I thought, oh, well, that's really nice for manufacturing businesses and so on, but I could never afford to do that in the restaurant. How can you pay an entry-level dishwasher, you know, the living wage? And then one day I was in the restaurant. I was down in the kitchen getting a piece of pie out of the refrigerator, usually the only reason I go to the kitchen. And all of a sudden, 3 young men that were peeling potatoes or who were dishwashers happened to look up at me at the same time. And all of a sudden, I felt it. You know, I said, oh my gosh, you know, Greg and Tyrone and you know, Jim, they're not making a living wage. How could it be that someone that works at the White Dog 40 hours a week cannot pay their rent or their clothes? Of course I want to pay the living wage. What have I been thinking about? So again, it was you know, feeling my connection to my employees that caused me to do that. And then, you know, once this happens, like once I started sharing with my competitors about where to get the pasture-raised pigs and the grass-fed beef and the free-range chickens and the organic fruits and vegetables and all that kind of stuff. We made a list of all the farmers and their phone numbers and what they served and sold and printed it up into a little booklet and handed it out to all our competitors and so on. And once I did that, I just, it grew in me, and I started giving stuff away. I started a nonprofit, White Dog Community Enterprises, and put 20% of my profits, you know, into my nonprofit, and used that money to hire the person who gave the free consulting to my competitors. And then I also made the loan to the farmer that I talked about earlier today. And then also giving 10% away to employees for profit sharing. So it is a thing that's contagious, and I think that also around the same time I started the Sustainable Business Network, and that spirit of generosity and giving, I think, was the feeling when we started our business network. So there's just that sense of caring and cooperation and joy that is part of our group. Susan's now the co-chair. So it is something that spreads, that's contagious. So thank you.
Birju.
Thanks, Nipun. And thank you for holding space. It's a rare space to be in such a place. And I love being in circle. Feels like being hugged. So I just want to share a couple of stories on this topic of transformation. A few small stories, very small stories. So my own journey of transformation started several years ago. And I remember sitting at a gathering in Starbucks, about a half dozen of us. We'd just been exposed to the concept of generosity and being different, and a lot of us were business school students, which I guess means that we didn't know much about generosity. Oops. Maybe I can walk in a different direction. I'll just walk around. So we decided that we wanted to experiment with different ways to be generous, and we didn't really know how, because it was very new. It's very weird to be told, why don't you try to be generous? So one of the people in the group said, you know, I think we should hand out lemonade. And it was a novel concept. The idea came up because it's really hard to be egotistical about handing out lemonade. And I thought about it. I realized that when I was in second grade, outside of my apartment complex, there were these 2 second-grade girls that they would hand out lemonade to people, and it made them feel really good. I said, well, this is great, and I can't feel good about doing things that second graders would do and walk around with a big head, so it's impossible. So great, let's do it. We all got together. We went to Central Park, lived in New York, in Strawberry Fields, and we all started handing out bunches of lemonade, hundreds and hundreds of glasses of it. And it kind of built over weeks. You'd think it's a very small thing, but the reaction that happened was unbelievable to me. People started coming up in tears, emotions. Why would you do this? No strings attached at all? One guy came up, he said, I know that there's a product coming out. I know. You're not telling me it's guerrilla marketing, I get it, it's fine. 20 questions went on, the whole thing. It's unbelievable. Second piece that I learned, misdirected happiness. So we got all these compliments. This lemonade tastes amazing. I love it. What did you do? It was Crystal Light. We didn't spike it. But that's the shift that was happening. And there was another shift that was happening, which was inside of me. I started thinking differently. I was asking, what is it that makes people feel so moved by what's happening here? And I thought that what was really standing out was holding space, which is what we're all doing here now. There's something about creating that space for synergistic value to come up. And I saw it happen again and again. It's just hard to translate that into dollars and cents or something that's tangible. And I remember talking about this in one of the interviews that I went through at a job a couple years later. I got this fantastic response. The guy says, well, that's great for somebody who's in retirement, but this is a job. So you've got to do something real. This isn't going to work here. So I said, well, that's fine, but there's something about holding space that I'd really want to try out. So in my next job, I'd been working there for a little bit, about a year. It's the one that I'm at right now. It's a mid-sized impact investing office. And so the principal of the group and I went out to lunch, and he said, look, you've been doing a good job. What do you want? Of course, what do you want means, what do you want? Of course, I've been drinking the lemonade. So I've got a different thing going on in my mind. And I say, well, what I really want is before we have meetings, I'd love to have a minute of silence. And he looks at me, investment office. He says, no, we don't have time for that. And then he thinks, he's like, well, let me sleep on it. He comes back, he realizes, I know what he could have asked for. All right, have your minute. So the minute became 2 minutes, and then 2 became 5, and then 5 became gatherings and retreats and circles and shifts in thinking. And you'd think, okay, well, that's nice, but that's 5 people. It doesn't really change the world. But we talk about all these ecosystems and the shifts that happen, and we can't really count on how they manifest over time. And so we started tracking our own storytellings in the office. We started asking people, what are you doing to try to hold space in the portfolio companies that we're working with? And one day we came across a gentleman, a very wealthy gentleman, one of these Forbes list types of people. And he's very interested in diversifying his assets, moving into real assets, because he has his own take on what's happening in our macro context. He wants to invest in land. So one of the companies that we've invested in is also working with land, regenerating land, trying to build soil as fast as we can. and it also happens to make money. So we spoke to him about it. We said, well, you might be interested in investing with us. Well, actually, we didn't do that. Because of the practices that we had in our office, rather than have this me-first attitude, what can you do for me because you're this Forbes person and we need your capital? We started asking deeper questions. We sat down with him, and he tells us one night over dinner, you know, my children, they are environmentalists. So we're like, no, yeah, that's tough, sorry. And so all of a sudden, we started having this conversation. We realized that he had a really difficult relationship with his family. So we offered him this opportunity to send his son to one of the ranches that we have to work on what it means to be a person that's connected to land at a deeper level, almost like boot camp in many ways. So his son shows up. He's a teenager. He's got this punk rock thing going on, the saggy pants, and he spends 3 months on a ranch. He comes back a different person. He comes back with a sense of connection to his family. And 3 months later, there's a gathering where this gentleman is present, and he walks up to us, and he's got tears in his eyes. And he says, what do you want? Anything. Anything. And we were all in tears. To me, there is something about transformational value. It breaks a person's thoughts on logic apart. And I can't tell you that line between the lemonade and this person who's made that shift. But now what we're doing together, putting capital at work in ways that are really beautiful and really powerful, but would never have been possible if we led with awareness first, as Nipun was saying. We led with transformation first. I feel like that's really the center of what I'd love to have a community to practice with. How can we all as a group put transformation in the center? Practice generosity first and foremost, even when it's difficult and scary. The more we can connect with each other to that end, I think it gives us all strength. Thank you.
Any thoughts that come up? That was amazing. That was amazing. There's so many parts. He's super humble about a lot of those stories, and some of those people that he didn't name. So yeah, it's a pretty amazing story at many levels. And Judy, thank you also for that fantastic share. So if anything comes up, just raise your hand, and really start to focus, I think, on how we can bring this into our ecosystems, our personal practice.
So I don't have my question fully formed. When Judy was talking, I started to think about, yeah, I've had that experience, going into factories and talking to people and hearing their stories, and all of a sudden, I looked at manufacturing completely differently. I got to have that experience, right? We have 1,000 people in the company. How can they have an experience like that? How can we design sort of triggering experiences into the daily lives in our businesses and companies? And then I didn't catch your name. I'm so sorry, but Birju. Yeah. When you were speaking, I thought, oh my God, so that's what happened, right? That's what happened. You did it. You did it with lemonade. You did it in these other ways. But I guess what I would really love is to get to think, and this may not be the moment, about how are the different ways we could kind of design those experiences into workplaces for everybody in the workplace? What might that look like? And anyway, so it's kind of a question and a thought and a whatever.
That's beautiful. We'll go here.
Just maybe a response or a suggestion for your question. I once worked at a nonprofit organization here in Buffalo, and it was my first experience to what it meant to have a professional family. I was working part-time, putting myself through school and juggling a whole bunch of other things. And I ended up being there for 6 years. I didn't expect that coming in. But I was given responsibility, and in some ways, I was appreciated in ways that I had never experienced in a working world before. In that time, a bunch of inspirations that are still incubating in my mind and waiting for outlets to be born came up, and the one thing that sort of meets your need was, what if there was a way that people could donate their time, in the sense that if an employee wanted to say, I want to volunteer or do this, but will you offset the cost of my not being here by somehow making it a donation? And then somebody talked about the time bank, and I'm like, oh my God. So then here you are with your question. I don't have it fully formulated, but there's synergy here. So.
We'll come to you.
I recently had an experience at my workplace of what ended up being somewhat of a revolution. And I would consider my job as in a progressive, sustainability-oriented, new economy forming place, and it really is. There are amazing people that work in my organization. And yet some people were experiencing pain, and there was not a lot of awareness of that. And through grassroots organizing, we were able to open a conversation that included everyone. It included all the stakeholders in a 2-day conversation, actually, is what it ended up being. Unexpected, and it has set off a chain of events that is transforming our organization. And one of the things that was a synchronicity is that I missed last year's conference because my fiance had breast cancer, and it was, this whole last 2 years have been really dark for me. And I ended up connecting with a guy who is in the at the Washington Health Foundation, and he connected with me persistently, but also through the human connection more than, hey, I want to collaborate with the Seattle Good Business Network, or I want to collaborate with Yes Magazine, or whichever entities. It was more like, who are you? I want to see who you are. And so I actually listened to him, and I didn't just like dismiss his emails or whatever. And then we became really close, and then he wanted to interview me on what it was like to be a caregiver in this role. And so I responded to the invitation because of the trusting relationship. And near the end of that, he's like, well, what else is going on in your life? Because we were connecting not just about the interview for his work, but also otherwise. And then he said, well, I'm also, outside of my job, doing something called Liberating Structures. And it's about unleashing the potential of everyone and in an organization, and releasing energy and making it possible to really transform organizations. And this is literally 2 days after this retreat. And he says, I can get your team scholarships for this training, which is normally $400 a person. And I said, there's no way we could afford that. And he says, I'll get your whole team in there. And he's like, it's in 5 days. So you have to get your people to agree to take a day and a half of work in the middle of releasing an issue of the magazine. And I pushed for it, and because the energy had already been released, people stepped up and said, yes, we want to attend this training. And it was all these synchronicities, but also the deep connections that allowed for this all to happen. And it's also a mild pitch to go to liberatingstructures.com, because there are tools and that can help with this stuff.
I just wanted to share that while we would love to find ways to help people reach these places where how do we find a way to help a worker experience that, what generosity means and where they fit in this structure, I've learned to trust that if we, group like this, doesn't have to act as a group. We've come here for some really important reason today, and I'm really surprised that it happened, but I'm always expecting it to happen. I expected this to happen about 5 years ago. Not that it was going to happen, but someday I would be sitting in a business conference talking about spiritual values, which would drive all of this. I knew it would happen, and it is. I think if we just hold the space of that belief, of that intention in our own brains, in our own hearts, that, my God, the magic happens, and it will. So trust it, and know that everything will be okay.
And I think one of the things that there was a hand here, yeah. One of the things that we also want to start thinking about as we get to the last couple of shares is also how we can continue the momentum forward around these themes and collectively.
Hi, I'm Dana. Two things that really come to mind for me. We're talking about how to encourage these practices and how to create these ideas in the ecosystem. I'm here as a scholarship recipient, so I'm very thankful for that, and that's a huge gift that I've received, so I'm really grateful. I am a supporter and friend of Buffalo First. I live here in Buffalo, and so this is all new to me, so I'm really grateful to be here among all of you. I think this is fantastic, and I'm so thankful. What I am taking away from this as a person who is not particularly spiritual, this has been very interesting, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I kind of came here thinking, oh, there's going to be all these economists and all these, you know, funders and people who like run local first organizations, and that there are those people, but I never expected it to be so personal, so emotional, and so connected, and I just am blown away by that, and I think it's a really incredible experience. And so I think that the thing that we found, and sort of something that you brought up in your talk, was that sort of each of us can be leaders. People don't know that they have a capacity to lead, and that every one of us has an example to set for others. And so what I think is very powerful is that folks here have, like when you said your employer said, what do you want? And you basically led by saying, you know, we need a little bit more connectedness. We need to be more, we need to have a little bit more time to reflect on what it is that we're doing and what it is that it means. And by asking for that, it created the snowball effect, you know, and I think that that's really powerful. And so anyone who sets an example for anyone else, which is all of us, if you're out there and you're asking for what you need, and you're setting an example, and you're saying, you know, look at what's possible. Here's what's possible, and you know, this is what we can create. And maybe you do that with baby steps at first, but it leads to greater things. And people will say that it's amazing and it's incredible, but you start that with a very ordinary small thing. So I guess I'm just trying to synthesize all the things that I'm learning here, and I'm really thankful for that. Thanks.
I want to go there. We have like 8 hands. I'm not sure how we do the time thing, but I'll go here first and then.
Thanks. This might be a little stream of consciousness, so I apologize. I've been pondering this question of what is out there that would answer this question of what we can all give, you know, our generosity, and what do I have to give, what do we all have to give, but also what do I want, what makes me happy, and what can I give that would make other people happy. And I keep coming back to this concept of time. And it relates to so many of the things that people have commented on, and to the time bank that you alluded to earlier. And your question, Birju, when you were talking, not your question, what your employer asked you, what do you want? And the first thing that popped into my head was that you would say, I want another week of vacation, so you could have more time. But actually, you were asking for time, just in a different context, time for all of us to reflect. And I'll make a long story not quite as long. Many years ago, I was interviewing someone, and he had gone 4 years into a PhD program and then dropped out. And of course, I asked, well, why did you drop out of your PhD program? And he said, the upshot of what he said was that he didn't like the person he was becoming. He was so invested, spending, you know, like 23 hours a day in the lab doing work that he didn't care about anymore. And his family and his friends, when he dropped out of his PhD program, they all said, well, geez, you know, Tom, one more year and you'd have a PhD from Cornell. And he said, but I don't want that anymore, and I can't get that year back. And that has stayed with me powerfully through all this time. I can't get that year back. And I think about my time, and all we really have is our time, right? Our time on this earth. And a couple months ago, I asked for more time, and I told my boss, I don't want to work 12 months anymore. I want to take summers off. And on the one hand, I thought, wow, that's so irresponsible. It's like so unprofessional, right? Everyone's going to think like, she's really flaky. But I'm lucky to work in an enlightened place. And he said, can Jenny run the program while you're away? She's my assistant. She's incredibly talented. And summer's always a slow time for us anyway. He said, can Jenny hold down the fort alone? I said, well, yeah. I wouldn't have asked otherwise. And he's like, well, then I don't see any problem. Great professional opportunity for Jenny. Great, it makes me happy, I get time. And the credit union saves money, because I just took a 25% pay cut. Well, all right, well, you know, time is more valuable to me than money, right? So Tuesday was my last day in the office until September. And now here I am at this conference, and I'm getting all these great ideas and inspirations, and I'm like, but I can't work on them until September. But next Thursday, I'm going on a big road trip around the country, and maybe I'll visit some of you. And I don't know what this process is going to look like, this 10, 12 weeks I have of time to do anything that I want and explore stuff. And I'm going to go climbing, and I'm going to sit by the beach with my dog, and I'm going to drink microbrews in all of your towns and things like this. But I'm also thinking like this time to reflect on me and to explore is going to bring all this stuff back home. And I think I'm going to approach all these ideas and projects and inspirations in September way more badass than I could if I just went back to work next week. So thank you. My take home is I hope we'll all think about ways that we can give of our time to others and not just take on another volunteer project, but your meaningful time from your heart, but also give and ask for time for ourselves, because that gives us more opportunity to do all of this reflective work and be happy and pursue what makes us happy.
So yeah, there's at least 5 hands. And Michelle's next to me.
I want to talk about this for like the next 48 hours, but we're supposed to be done.
Yeah. We're supposed to be done, and I think maybe a question is, and you seem like you have a burning share, so I'm going to give it to you. I have to honor the circle.
Thank you. This is beautiful, and I find myself reflecting on all of those who've been very generous over time and place and culture, who have been taken advantage of for their generosity, and I just want to hold a space for them and acknowledge that that's part of the history of generosity and part of why we're here and why we want generosity in the world. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the question is, how do we continue this conversation post this circle? We do want to close. Otto, it feels like you have a share. You had raised your hand earlier, so we're just going to give it to you. And let you conclude. Why don't you do?
Well, I hand the conclusion over to Michelle. I want to say that I truly experienced this conversation as a huge gift. What's staying with me is the unconditional giving as the trigger of this phenomenon that we so that's the anchor. So the question I want to ask to myself and to all of us is, where is it that I can make a commitment for this unconditional giving that is not depending on anything returning? And I heard like 3 different areas, and maybe it is, we could take a moment, and maybe even as we walk out, where is it in my personal life, kind of where I can make a commitment where I just explore the generative force of this in a very focused way. So where is it in my personal life? Where is it in my organizational context? Where, and we heard many great examples. So where is it that I could, you know, like the 1 minute before the meeting. So we heard like a different, where I could create this space in an organizational context. And then the last one I want to also drop, which is probably mostly unanswered, is what does it mean to organize an economy around that principle? That we distribute the opportunity for unconditional giving in the maximum way. And what it means to deliver the solution to that also, or to indicate a solution space, is that we decouple what we give from what we get, because that was unconditionality means. And it means that we decouple, as we heard in all these examples, what I do in my work from the income, the money that I receive. The closer that's coupled, the more dysfunctional we behave. And acting from love means basically to decouple that. Now, what does that mean for an economy? For example, unconditional income grants that would distribute the opportunity for this type of operating to everyone, not just a few, in a more, or create a structural basis for that. So it opens up a whole new set of questions where we need to rethink old economic categories from that ecosystem level that's based on the unconditional giving rather than the transactional rationality that we are used in thinking. Sorry, that was a little long, but that is the third dimension, I think, that we need to include in our commitment and inquiry as we move forward.
The last thing I would say is these really should be, Nipun talks about this all the time, small things. So we could leave this room and we could, there's a cash mob happening. You could go participate. But tonight at the party, you could just be really kind to people. You could think consciously, I am going to, oh, that person has a heavy bag. Can I carry it? We could just unleash this kindness from tonight at the party. And just small things, just practice it. See how that feels. And everybody will be so surprised, and then that will multiply. So that's one thing, is the things should be small, because it's inner transformation. It's not a big strategic plan that's going to require 100 people and $10 million in order to make the kind of thing happen. It should be just small things, and then also talk about it. So if you're going to be like Judy and buy goat cheese from a farmer who kisses the goat's ears because it makes the milk sweeter, tell her that that's why you're buying it from her, and tell everybody on your team that's why you're buying it from them, so that everybody knows, oh, that matters. We got to spread it, put attention to it, and then it will grow. And then and share that kind of story of Judy kissing the goat's ears. You know, we should set up something, a way so that we can share those ideas with each other. And then finally, we need to host this in our own community. So this kind of conversation, and just to spread it. Those would be the three things that are so important to me. And I wonder how we could stay in touch about this. What do we do? Make a Facebook? Is that the best way? Well, no, soon. I want to practice. I want to hang out on these ideas for anybody that wants to. So is the best way we make a Facebook page?
I mean, for those of us not on Facebook, okay. By choice, you should see what they do with the stuff you post up there. But maybe we can just have an email list, and just as a very crude way to stay connected, keep the dialogue going.
If people are open to Skype, there is a way to create a persistent Skype conversation with hundreds of people in it, and it's really low impact on your life compared to email or other situations. I'm part of one about creating alternative currencies, and it's a worldwide network with about 200 people that are trying to create a new currencies. I don't know if that's something that might help.
Maybe we'll do both. Maybe we'll do a Facebook page and some sort of other thing, and just, what do we do to get all of you? Should we just send it to, how are we going to sign you up? Do we send it to the whole conference list, and then you tell us if that's what you're interested in, or I don't know if you have time to write everybody's name down. Okay, send it to everybody. Okay, I'll send it to everybody. You guys remember that you want to do this, and then we will start to talk to each other about it. Okay? Okay, okay, yes, good. And let's be really kind at the party tonight and spread it.
Let's be really kind all the time. All the time. But especially when you're inspired by it.